So we've all been here before. You're at an event, maybe you're at the park, maybe you're at the beach, maybe you're in a meeting, maybe you're at your party, maybe you're with extended family. And all of a sudden, you notice you're not dressed. You're completely naked. You know what I'm talking about, right? Because we've all been there. It's that dream. And it's that dream we have, and we're like, why did I have that dream? Psychologists, they talk about it all the time, trying to figure out what do these dreams mean? Not just when you're undressed, but what does it mean what is going on underneath the surface? When it comes to these naked dreams, they don't know exactly what it means, but they usually classify it, most psychologists classify it as an insecurity, a feeling of vulnerability in one area or another. And there's other guesses and ideas. But the point is, it's not about fabric. It's not about cloth. It's about something that's happening on the inside. It's not even about the skin. And so we need to understand that a lot of things that we see are not what they seem. It matters what's going on underneath. And you can learn a lot about people. You can learn a lot about yourself by what you put on. And a lot of times the things that you're putting on aren't really important, but they represent something that's going on inside. This is what I mean. So I was on a video call this last week, and as I'm talking to this person, I noticed they have a Dodger hat on. And immediately I knew something about that person. It revealed something on the outside, revealed something that was going on the inside. This person was a Dodger fan. We had immediate connection. If I'm walking down the street or driving and I see someone with a guitar that they decided to wear, and they're walking down the street, which is not a common thing, you know by looking at that person, music is a big deal. They want to be identified with music. Or maybe they're just so passionate about it, something may come up and they want to have their guitar right there ready to play. Because of something that they're wearing, you know what's going on inside. I'm sure everyone's really excited about this, but the political season is ramping up as we get ready for the presidential election and other elections in November. And so there's all kinds of t-shirts and hats that people will wear. And so you know something more about them because of what they put on the outside. In fact, they don't just put it on their body. Some people will put stickers on their cars, or they'll put it on their social media, or they'll even dress their front lawn with some kind of poster or something letting you know what they think and what they feel. So where we're headed in this message is that we need to be very aware of the things that we wear, because they reveal who we follow, who our leaders are. And if we're talking about following Jesus, we need to recognize the other idols in our life. And I know that may sound a little intense, like, whoa, that's a little far. Is it though? I would ask you to step back and think about those things that you are wearing and why you're wearing them, and to ask what the influence is of that person or that organization, or maybe even that thing that is moving you, that is leading you. Because as followers of Jesus, it matters what we wear. But I'm not talking about cloth or fabric. And so for many of you, you're not followers of Jesus. You're just listening in. And that's okay. So you're not held to this standard. But for those of us that are followers of Jesus, this is how we should be dressed. This is what we should be wearing. Paul the Apostle talks about it, and then Jesus talks about it. And as followers of Jesus, we need to have this figured out because it matters to God. And if it matters to him, it should matter to us. And I need to be very clear here. We're not talking about what Christians should wear, because there is a difference between Christians and followers of Jesus. It's been that way for centuries. Christianity has been molded and turned it into like a sect, and their values and meanings and focuses and rules change as time goes on. But as a follower of Jesus, it's pretty simple what we're supposed to wear. So let's look at it. It's in Colossians 3, 12 through 14. And Paul says this to this church of non-Jews, Gentiles, and most likely it's a home church. It's something small. And so he says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved. As I go through everything else here, I want you to hold on to that holy and dearly loved, because that's the context by which God wants us to be dressed. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves. And here's what we should clothe ourselves with: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all of these, almost like a trench coat, over everything that you just put on love, which binds them all together in unity. Now, there's so much there in the wardrobe. They're all intertwined, and love covers it all. But I just want to focus on 3 of them for right now. They're all important. And the 3 that I'm going to focus on aren't more important than another, but I think they're appropriate for the times we're in right now. So, clothe yourselves with compassion. Now, that word is such a powerful word that Paul is using, because when we say compassion, it means something. But when he says it in his translation, it means the bowels, like this area right here, your stomach, that kind of compassion. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like, actually, my son is here right now. He's part of the filming crew. And I remember when we took him, because the doctor said that he had something wrong with his heart. I didn't feel it in my head. I didn't feel it in my throat. I felt it here. I felt this movement of like, no, I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him to go through anything like that. I remember being in the northern region of Malawi, and I saw Dad pushing a bike. They had to travel 3 days away, I found out, as he pushed this bike with his son on the seat of the bike for 3 days. And so he pushes him all the way here to this clinic, because there was no clinic where they lived in Chipaica. And so they take him all the way out to this small little clinic, which you would consider way less than an urgent care. Because with a machete, somehow he had sliced his leg wide open, and they knew they needed medical attention. And when I saw that compassion didn't come from here, didn't come from here, it was here. It moves you. And that's what moved me and others to say, this cannot be, because that's what compassion does. But you can't put on a feeling. So how do you get this compassion? You can't just go, I'm going to be compassionate. You have to see. With my son, there was a connection automatically there. With these strangers that I didn't know, who were coming from 3 days away from a culture I didn't fully understand, I had to look at them. I had to think of the situation. I put myself in their place. And by doing that, that's where the compassion began to rise up. It was an intentional decision to look. And with some people, it's easier than with others. But Paul doesn't say, hey, if it's easy, clothe yourself with compassion. This is what we as followers of Jesus wear: compassion. The other word on this list of virtues that I want to highlight is gentleness. And I like the way that Andy Stanley described gentleness. He said it's using your strength not against another, but using your strength appropriately based on another. And an example you can look at would be the way that you pick up a weight, a 45-pound weight, versus how you would pick up a lost contact lens. If it's a contact lens, you know that you can break it. You could tear it apart. So you're gentle, super gentle. I don't even have contact lenses, but I've had to help others find them. And I didn't pick it up like a weight. What we wear as followers of Jesus is an attitude of looking at others and being gentle with them. Understanding that regardless of appearances, whether it be physical, whether it be an aura they give of strength, we as humans are all fragile. And we need to be gentle with each other. And just like compassion, this doesn't come natural. You have to practice it. The last one that I want to look at is love. Paul said that you put on love, which binds them all together. All of these virtues, it gathers them all together in perfect unity. It binds them. And so love is the most important one. Remember, as we've talked about in this series on Follow, the most important thing that we need to do is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. So what does that look like to love? It's one of those words that's difficult to describe. So we always want to try to describe it in a practical way. So Jesus said in John chapter 13, so we're going to a different place. We're going to Jesus' words now. In John 13 and verse 34, he said, "A new command I give to you, that you love one another." But then he ratchets it up a whole nother rung. He says, "As I have loved you, so you must love one another." So if we want to know what love looks like, let's look at how Jesus loved them. Because he's got his followers right there and his closest. And he says, I'm giving you a new command to love one another, to love others. But do that in the same way that I loved you. And think about who's in that circle. A couple weeks ago, we talked about Matthew. And I can see Jesus saying, Matthew, remember how well, let's face it, you were a tax collector. Remember how everybody was against you because basically you were a traitor to your country. And you let greed get in the way of your family and your friends and your heritage. Do you know how other people looked at you? But do you remember how I treated you? Do you remember how I loved you? That's how you should love others. Hey, Nathaniel, do you remember how I loved you? Do you remember the first words that you said to me when I met you? You said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Who does that? You made fun of me, my family, my people. You talked smack to me. But remember how I loved you? Remember how I responded? Nathaniel, that's how I want you to love others. In his circle, there were women. That was uncommon. Rabbis, teachers did not take on women as followers. And yet, he can say to those women, you know how you were treated? You know how the religious leaders said that your testimony didn't even matter? If you said someone beat up another person or stole, it doesn't even matter because it came from a woman? But do you remember how I loved you? That's the way you need to love everyone else. The adulterous woman. She did something wrong. She did something destructive. And in fact, the entire community was empowered by the laws in place to kill her with rocks. And he can say, do you remember how I treated you though? Do you remember the compassion and the gentleness by which I approached you? In the same way, you need to love others. You're all going to abandon me soon, but I will never leave you or forsake you. That's how we are supposed to love one another. That's what love looks like. That's how we're supposed to dress. And then Jesus goes on in verse 35 to say this. By this, all people will know that you follow me, if you have love for one another. Another way to say that is, it says, the evidence of your decision to follow me will be proven in the way that you treat others. And this is where I believe the divide is between Christians and followers of Jesus. Because I've been repeating this theme over and over again. Because we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be honest as the church. Christians, we don't have a great reputation for the way that we treat others. That doesn't mean there aren't plenty of Christians that are living, dressing daily in compassion and humility and gentleness, bearing with one another and forgiving. However, as a whole, we don't have that reputation. And that's not right. We, as followers of Jesus, have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. The evidence of this decision to follow Jesus will be proven in the way that we treat others. We're not going to be... Jesus is saying, look, you can go to church. You can even go to Bible studies. You can even go on mission trips. You can even give money. But that's not going to be the evidence that you're following me. If you're following me, then you need to love one another as I have loved you. That is what you wear. That is what sets you apart. By the way in which we love one another, people will know we belong to Jesus. And so in these discussions, it's really easy to go, okay, got it. Okay, so love one another. But what about, and then we move on to some issue. Now, if it's an issue, that means it's non-essential. This is essential, to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. To love each other as we have been loved. When we've got that mastered, when you have that mastered, then you can move on to these other areas, these other non-essentials. But we can't even get the most important things right. So that should simplify things for us. That should make it simple that we just need to focus on this. As we talked about in the great commandment, what Jesus says was the greatest commandment. He said, if you love God and you love others, then everything else will be taken care of. Everything else falls underneath it. So but what about, it doesn't need to be discussed, because if we're loving God and loving others, that will be taken care of. But so easily we go off into these little rabbit trails and we forget what's most important. And with everything that's coming up and everything that's going on, we need to stay in our lane. That's what we're responsible for. That's what we wear. It's obvious that there isn't a country on this planet as a whole that's following Jesus. The vast majority of Christians aren't following Jesus. But I want to bring us back to what Paul said. That's not supposed to be where our attention is. Paul says, clothe yourselves. Don't worry about what other people are wearing. You do what Jesus has called us to. Jesus didn't say, as I have loved you, make sure that everyone else loves one another. Jesus said, as I have loved you, so you must love others. We got enough work in our own lives to take all the time we need, which will leave us very little time to discuss issues. So, here's the question. What are you wearing? Obviously, we're not talking about fabric. We're not talking about cloth. We're not talking about skin. We're talking about what's underneath. If we're following Jesus, then we make a decision with what we will wear. And I can tell you, this is not easy. I was thinking as I was getting ready to teach this, how can I teach this the way that I acted last night? I didn't treat others well. It didn't come natural. You know what else doesn't come natural? Wearing clothes. Do you see any 1-year-olds that go, hey, whoa, 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 I just can't leave the house. I need some clothes. It's a learned thing. It's a training thing. When it comes to putting on this compassion, this patience, this humility, this forgiving of one another, it's a discipline. It's something we train ourselves in. And so when we talk about clothing ourselves, this will never come natural. In moments it will, but in general, it's a decision. I follow Jesus, and I will daily, minute by minute, try to wear this. When I'm coming into a situation or a meeting or an event, and I feel something opposite of what these clothes are coming on, I will pause, I will look to the Lord, and I will be intentional to do my best to clothe myself with compassion and humility and gentleness and kindness and patience. And I will do my best to bear with one another. And if you're listening in and you've been hurt by someone that is trying to follow Jesus, and they were either half-dressed or undressed, I ask for your forgiveness. There's a very good chance it could have been me. There's been so many times, and I'm sure it's probably going to happen today. We're trying our best. And if you're a follower of Jesus, be gentle with yourself, but be clear of what we're to wear. May God bless.